Welcome to Results Not Typical, a podcast that tackles fitness myths and unpacks fitness culture. I'm your host, Nikki Naab-Levy, and let's get into the episode. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Results Not Typical. Thanks for joining us, whether you are watching this on YouTube in video form or listening to this in your ears in quote-unquote podcast form. I am going to lead this conversation off with just a really blanket content or trigger warning, which is I have I'm just going to call them friends of the pod at this point because they've both been on it and we talk all the time. My friends Isabelle Barter and Jordana Edelstein, and we are going to end up having sort of a conversation around weight loss. And with this conversation around weight loss, this is a fairly neutral conversation around weight loss where we are going to discuss contexts where it may be appropriate. It may be a goal you have, and sort of some ideas around like, what is our relationship to it? Can we do this sustainably? Can we do this in a way without losing our minds? Is it diet culture? Just all of these kind of messy things. And so with that, we're going to talk about weight loss. So if you're not comfortable with that topic, this particular podcast episode is not for you. And I would suggest that you turn this off and go listen to another episode because there's plenty of episodes on this podcast that have nothing to do with weight loss. We will also mention probably things like the scale, calorie counting, food tracking, perhaps eating disorders. We're not entirely sure where this conversation is going to go. So again, if these are sensitive topics for you, please take care of your mental health. Please don't listen to this one. You can turn it off and we'll catch you on another episode. So with that, I'm also going to just do the blanket acknowledgement of privilege because we also all, three of us sitting here have a certain level of thin privilege, financial privilege, all of those things. And so we don't want to pretend that that doesn't exist and that that doesn't influence our perspectives on things. So we are acknowledging that right now. This is going to be a fairly privileged conversation, but I still think it's one that is helpful for people to have because so many of us are struggling with self-image, with body image, with misinformation and confusion and frustration around weight loss that is not helpful. So with that long intro, thank you for being here, Isabelle and Jordana. And I'll just so we don't talk over each other, I'm going to let you each just quickly introduce yourself, and then we're just going to dive into the meat of this. So Isabelle, why don't you go first if you don't mind?
Sure. My name is Isabelle Barter. I am a strength coach, movement coach. I have a background in applying the latest of what we're learning about neurology for sports performance. And in terms of this conversation, I'm also a precision nutrition level 1 coach. And I have in the past done nutrition coaching, and I'm on my personal exploration with all things nutrition for myself.
Awesome. Yay. Hi, I'm Jordana Edelstein. I'm a nutrition coach, and I work with women who have been kind of lifelong yo-yo chronic dieters and dealt with a lot of disordered eating patterns around binge restricts, dealing with foods as good or bad, kind of excessive crash dieting, all sorts of those things that so many of us have been through. I've also studied with precision nutrition as well. And I'm really just happy to be having this conversation and putting this out into the world for people to share and get support from.
Yes. All right. So I'm just going to kick us off, which is this with a little bit of context, which is this whole conversation is being recorded because I had a very similar conversation with both of you on Instagram. I think it was both on Instagram. Anyways, I talked to both of you about this on the same day, and I was like, oh, this is something that's kind of an interesting phenomenon, I'm going to call it, that has popped up on social media recently, which is as we start to call out diet culture and as we start to talk about things like weight stigma and fat phobia and the mistreatment of people who are in bigger bodies and all of these things, which I'm not discounting any of that. These are all very legitimate and important conversations. We've now fallen into this interesting space of there's a lot of us who still really struggle with our body image, and we, for whatever reason, we want to lose weight, we want to change our bodies, and now we feel like really bad about wanting to do that, and that's creating its own set of challenges and behaviors that I'm not sure are helpful. So I just thought, let's have a conversation about this. And I mean, Jordana, this has been a lot of the content that you've been posting on social media lately of this whole, like, the problem with black and white thinking. So do you want to maybe sort of head us off by speaking to sort of how this idea of it's like not one or the other?
Mm-hmm. Sure. So I think that people are meaning to be well-intentioned with this in terms of, trying to create a space for people to feel like they don't have to lose weight, that they're coming at it from this place of, well, we live in this culture where women are told they have to be small and they have to be thin and they have to look a certain way in order to have value and feel worthy. And that definitely exists. But I don't think that women need to have autonomy is ultimately, and I know, Nikki, you talk a lot about this, but women need to be able to have a choice. And not every woman who wants to lose weight is doing it for that reason, right? And we don't know. It's not for us to say that it's good or bad that you want to lose weight. What it is for us, I think, as professionals working in this industry, is to give people the support and the resources to do these things in a sustainable, healthy, happy way. And so I think that when there's this conversation around, well, if you want to lose weight, you're contributing to diet culture, or, if you're working with someone who talks about weight loss, that means that their values are not properly aligned. You're then kind of relegating people who want to lose weight into the very thing that you're trying to like fight against. And it's sort of like, well, that doesn't make sense. You're telling people who want to lose weight they're part of diet culture. You don't want to work with them. So then what are they supposed to do? They're going to go back to the diet culture that we've all grown up with, the 1,200 calorie diets and the fasting and the MLMs and like all of the things that we've all done and know about. So the approach that I take and that I think needs to be out there is a both and. You can want to lose weight and want to make strides and move against diet culture in terms of this pressure on women thing. You can want to lose weight and work on body acceptance. Like, those things are not mutually exclusive. They're just not. Like, even if I take myself and sample size of 1, like, I'm a size 12. I have been a little bit smaller than this with extreme restrictive dieting. I have been a larger size than this. And I have lost weight in a sustainable way. And I'm at this point and this is me for life. Like, this is it. So, and I used to struggle being a size 12 with a belly and the love handles and the whole thing. I have railed against and battled for 25 years since I was a teenager. So for people to say that you can't want to lose weight and work on body image just isn't true, because I lost weight and got to this place and found acceptance in this size and shape at the same time. And I actually think that's like part of it, because losing weight, this is kind of like where diet culture is about losing weight and getting your smallest size, losing 10 pounds in 4 weeks. It's this extreme, fast, quick, instant gratification thing. It's not about work. It's not about trust. It's just about rules and checking boxes and programs. Whereas for me, someone can want to lose weight. It doesn't mean that they're trying to get to be the smallest clothing size possible. Maybe they just want to lose 10 pounds or lose 1 clothing size, or it's not even about a quantifiable number. It's about how they feel in their body, which is what it was for me. Like, when I was sitting, I didn't like the way this weight felt on me. I felt physically uncomfortable. I'm a size 12 now. I still have lots of fat on my belly, but I feel comfortable with it. So and this both and applies to so many things. Like, you can learn hunger and fullness cues and track your food at the same time. And so many of these tools and techniques that are actually really give a ton of information about, it's data. It's like the scale. I know, Nikki, you mentioned this, like weighing yourself, tracking food. These are data points. It's information that you then see how your body responds to these things or how you feel. And you're like, oh, this is working. This isn't working. And I change things. It's like research. I mean, in a way, and there's nothing wrong with that. Not saying it's for everyone. Everyone has their own approach. But to like blanket say that these things are bad, yes, they can be used to detriment for sure. But they have, everything is contextual. It's so nuanced. Like, people are trying to move away from the all or nothing thing, but then they're using that same structure of thinking to support their own kind of side of things. So that's my intro. Hi.
Well, we'll just stop recording. That was enough. We're good.
Yeah, done.
Good job. That was a lot. I know.
No, thank you for just like laying it all out there like that, because it's so true. That's the thing about this is like there's no right or wrong, in my opinion. It's very much, it depends, right? And so for anyone who's listening, who's like, yeah, I don't want to teach weight loss, that's fine. You don't have to talk about weight loss. You don't have to talk about fat loss. And if someone comes to you and they're like, this is my goal, you don't have to work with them, right? Like, this is not everyone needs to coach on this. But I think at the heart of what we're saying is like education about how the human body works and how nutrition works. It's actually very empowering, because it also, I think, creates parameters for realistic expectations around how long things take, if it's worth it to you, if it's not worth it to you, and sort of having like this framework of like understanding and appreciating the process along the way, instead of, again, it turning into like the ping pong ball, like merry-go-round of fucking madness. Of like, okay, I'm on the diet, I'm off the diet, I'm restricting, I'm binging, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, which is, I mean, it is a descent into madness. And for anyone who's like done the crash diet, hit their goal weight, and completely wrecked themselves physically and mentally, oh, hi, that would be me. I have some real bad stories about it. I don't recommend it. And I do think that there needs to be sort of this I do think there needs to be space for this conversation of like, cool, many of us have done this. And maybe your route to self-acceptance is like, screw it, I'm not touching the weight loss thing. I am where I am. I'm just going to not deal with nutrition at all, or learn about nutrition in a very neutral way with no context of weight loss. That's totally fine, right? But I think for some of us, repairing our relationship with ourselves and with food has to come from this place of analyzing it and understanding it and creating a framework for it. And this is something that I haven't really mentioned, because it's like a thing that, again, when it's people in your life, you don't want to throw the people in your life under the bus, but like, without getting into the context of it too heavily, I grew up with just a blatant eating disorder being modeled to me. That is a large part of my childhood. And that is something that I get to contend with as an adult, that has nothing to do with the media. It has nothing to do with me being in the fitness industry. Is it how I ended up in the fitness industry? I don't know. That's a question too complex for me to try to answer or unpack. And I don't want to deal with it in therapy, but like, we all have stuff in our head. And for me, nutrition education has been really valuable in combating that narrative in my head, because it gives me something to rely on that's like fact-based. And now I'm in my own ramble. So Isabelle, I'm going to turn it to you. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, the initial thing I'm thinking as we're talking about these ideas, it reminded me that I actually took the precision nutrition certification, not as a nutrition certification. The reason I took it is because it had a reputation, or they had a reputation of actually being really good at behavior change and being very good at talking to clients about changing behavior. So before even being a nutrition platform, that was actually how I was looking at it, was from a coaching perspective. I kept running into, I work with a lot of people who have pain challenges. I work with a lot of people who don't fit into the typical fitness industry, just do this pre-prescribed workout. Because it would just not work for them. And so a huge part of that is, and the funny thing is, the same type of person who has a harder time with fitness is on exercise, movement, getting out of pain. It's often the very same behaviors about what Jordana's talking about, all or nothing thinking, with, we just call it exercise instead of nutrition, right? It's like, I want to get in shape, so I'm going to go and do extreme workouts. I'm going to start from having not gotten off my couch, and I'm going to go do CrossFit level 4, you know?
Isabelle, I feel very called out right now. I'm just saying.
Sorry. I want my own versions of this. I probably didn't participate as much in extreme dieting, but I had participated in extreme fitness trends and trying to think that like I could go from doing, you know, nothing to, I want to do a triathlon next week, right? So I have this kind of magical thinking. And so the same framework for the things that are very, I think part of it is it's an education about what are the factors involved in changing behavior, any behavior. And those are good things to talk about. And a huge part of changing behavior, whether it's related to nutrition, whether it's related to activities, is going to be, what is it worth for you to do? And having real conversations about, I think it's totally fine to want to change what your body looks like or feels like to you. It's also totally fine to not want to change that. And that is a huge thing. No wonder our industry is trying to correct, because we went for so long, it was like you show up in someone's intake form and the options of your goals are to want to lose weight, to want to get slimmer, to want to build more muscle while losing weight. Like there was nothing else to tone, right? While losing weight. There were no other goal options presented. It wasn't like, I want to feel better or have more energy or be able to survive this endurance training thing I'm about to do. Those were not options given to people, but it's actually, those are the same foundational principles that are going to be involved no matter what you choose as your goal. I went a little bit rambly there, but
no, it's like an overcorrection. It's like, yes, not that I know anything about finance or the stock market, but like these principles happen all the time. Like Jules Mitchell, who's one of my teachers and mentors, talks about this, like the pendulum, like it swings from one end to the other. And it's like, 100% to your point, like there's a place for people who have disordered eating or struggle with food or body image and don't want to lose weight. Yes, that is a legitimate thing. I fully support the people who work in that space and support those people. But it doesn't mean, I think what I see in some of that is then like, I can't think of a word, I'm going to use the word like talking down to people who still want to lose weight, and that you can't do both at the same time. So it's like, fine, be in that space. There's 100% a need for that. There's also a need for people who want to lose weight to also do those things.
Right. And get quality information that is grounded in science and research and habit change and compassion.
Yep.
That's a huge piece. And understanding that it is a longer term process than what is being marketed to us. Because that is, gosh, how much time is it spending? Most of the conversations I have where people meet disappointment is because they literally thought, one of the more recent ones I had was somebody who already had a relatively trim body to begin with, thought that they were going to lose 5 inches off their waist in 4 weeks. And they genuinely had this belief that they took their measurements after a month and they were like, why didn't I lose 5 inches? And in my mind, I'm like, oh my God, I don't think you actually know what 5 inches looks like. So we got the measuring tape out, and it's just, and it's not judgment. It's like, we don't know what is normal. I don't think many people out there know what a normal normal rate of weight loss is, what the normal curve is going to look like on a graph, right? I think it's coming out more and more about, and then trade-offs. It's not often discussed that one of the most recent ones I came across was weight loss and depression. It is studied that it is very typical that when weight loss begins, that depression usually increases. Like, these are things that aren't being discussed about. Like, so instead of saying like weight loss is good or bad, talking about, well, is this a good time for you to try that given what else is going on in your life, right? Like, is it a good time to begin restrictive behaviors based on your history, based on what you have going on currently, knowing there could be potential side effects, right? These are getting the right information from systems that actually can consider where the individual is, not just saying, well, weight loss is good for everyone and all of your health problems are going to go away if you do them, or you shouldn't want to lose weight because then you're not being body positive, which is like its own mindfuck. It's just really hard to deal with.
Well, yeah, that mindfuck. And then another mindfuck that's in this, right, is that like, we don't understand how scale weight works, like as a population. Like, when we talk about weight loss, what we really usually mean is body recomposition, which means fat loss, which also might mean adjusting your musculature at the same time, depending on what you are doing. And something that a lot of people don't realize is, A, are you trained? I mean, are you strength training or untrained? Because if you are strength training, you are going to be physically heavier just by literal water retention. And your weight is probably going to go up on days after you strength trained. And so if you're using the scale as a marker and you're strength training, depending on the context of where you're coming from, your weight's going to be all over the place, where it's going to be a really poor measure of like what is actually happening to your body composition. And depending on how easily you retain water and how your body responds, it can be, I mean, the scale is not always a helpful tool. Like, I'll just say right now, as we sort of like dance between like personal anecdote and actual science information, personal anecdote time right now, like I'm in the middle of doing what is body recomposition, because I'm not going to stop strength training while I'm in a deficit. I can't strength train as heavily, but like for me, that is like my anchor in sanity. I'm not letting go of my anchor to sanity. So with that, I also know that like when I started, like if I go for context, right? Like I was really ill back in March and I had all sorts of fun with water games because I had like a real mishap in IVF, where I had a really, really, really bad reaction. This is a fun story about the scale where I had to track my weight because I put on 20 pounds of fluid in 3 days.
Wow.
Because I had OHSS. And so after that, I had to, right. I knew roughly where I started. I had to track my weight because the scale is like literally the way how you can tell if you're getting better or worse with OHSS. And at the end of it, I was super untrained and I came out of it something like 5 pounds lighter than when I started. And then like 2 weeks later, let's just say I was up, I don't know, 2 pounds or something because I was like eating like a normal person again in strength training. And it's like, if I was trying to use like my quote unquote low weight coming out of illness and being untrained as like the baseline, I'd be a head case about it. You know what I mean? And it's like, these are things that we're not considering, is like so much of weight is just water gains and people don't get that. And then they attach their progress or lack of progress to the scale. And then that influences their behavior and feelings of shame and frustration. And that's something we just don't understand very well as a population.
Yeah. It's like, there's so much misinformation out there. Like the scale is showing you is a piece of data that's including so many things. It's not just fat loss. And that's what people don't ever like want to like think about. And nobody talks about that. In addition to like that weight loss is never linear, that it's up and down. Like, yes, if you're trying to lose fat, you want the downward trajectory. You want it to be down, but along the way, like you're going to have spikes. It's normal for your body to go up and down. And it's not like you've gained. I mean, I had this conversation with clients all the time. Like they'll send me a message, the scale's up 4 pounds. I'm like, you have not gained 4 pounds of body fat. It's literally physiologically, biologically impossible unless you have eaten. I mean, it's a tremendous amount of food in a very short period of time. It's how are your bowel movements? How much salt did you have? How many carbs did you have? How much water are you drinking? What's your stress level? Are you sleeping? Are you moving? There are so many factors. Nobody talks about this. And then people literally like their whole emotional well-being is living or dying by the number on this scale. It's really sad. Like, it's just, I'm so glad we're talking about this, that like you're creating this platform, Nikki, because hopefully it just starts to let people know that the scale is not, it's not what you think it is.
But it does mess with your mind. Like,
oh, yeah,
I have to just
exactly.
share that because I'm currently in a program. So personal story, in the COVID times, I got really into drinking wine in the first half of the COVID. And my habit, so I also was living in Phoenix at the time, where the weather last year, 2020, we had 50 consecutive days over 110. So I was getting under 2,000 steps a day from somebody who had a studio before and left the house all the time and got lots of movement, to being stuck in my house, not enough movement, depressed, changing business model, getting really into drinking. And my weight really went up in the course of a year, then moved to California, changed my whole life over again. And I thought, oh, I'm out and about more. I'm more active. I'm clocking over 10,000 steps a day. Surely my weight will recover. And it didn't. It continued to go on this upward trajectory that I was like, I don't understand what is happening. And then, by the advice of several colleagues, because I was completely lost, they encouraged me to get like this data, the ring, right? The Aura ring, to like start tracking sleep, start tracking recovery factors. And it was unbelievable with increasing sleep and also changing the way I was training, less high intensity exercise, which, by the way, what do they tell you? High intensity interval training will shock your metabolism into functioning more. No, Isabelle had to remove high intensity training completely. No more tennis, no more high heart rate, nothing above 70% of my heart rate maximum. And all of a sudden, the weight started to come down along with other practices, but it was fascinating. And then on the mind fuck part of it, every time I step on the scale and it's lighter, I'm like, ooh, look at my new muscle definition. Ooh, look at it. Every time it's 1 pound heavier, I'm like, oh, it's bloated looking again. And it's not true because I film myself on camera all the time. And I'll look back like 3 weeks later at the day that I thought was like, I was up in weight. And I'm like, I look the fucking same. But in my mind, my belief system, my attitude, my culturation, the brainwashing of society and brainwashing of living. So I'm also a coach who is like trying to be more body neutral about myself, but I am still deeply ingrained with messaging from before, right? And yet trying to also understand that with clients, that neutrality, right? Being neutral about these things and also at the same time living it as a human and seeing myself. It's totally that yoga concept, right? You're like observing yourself, going through stuff that you're doing as yourself, but you are not yourself. You're this other thing, observing yourself. That's how I feel. That's how this experience makes me feel.
Yeah. And you've brought up such a good point here, right? Which is sort of part of like our little pre-chat, which is like the scale is a tool. Depending on the day and the moment and who you are, maybe today, maybe tomorrow, maybe forever. Sometimes the tool is helpful. Sometimes the tool is unhelpful. As I've started purposely, again, looking at body recomposition, there was a part of me that was like, maybe this would be a really good blog post. I'm going to use weight trends to illustrate to people like how there's not going to be a lot of change, even if there's physical change. Turns out I, Nikki, the human being, I'm still a little too attached to numbers when I'm messing around with things like a caloric deficit. And I was like, no, this is distracting and not in a good way. I need to not look at the scale right now. It's fine. I just need to focus on habit change practices because that's not where my problem is. My problem is like this random number, even though I know exactly why it's doing it, is still like infiltrating my head. And I can't have that. Like, it's not good for me. It's not helpful towards my goals. And so like, I'm not going to do it. Like, I'm like, cool, dear scale, you and I are taking a 14-day break and we'll check back in and see where we are mentally in 14 days. But I also know that like the scale isn't evil. I also intellectually know like my inherent worth is not in the scale. I just know that the part of me that's deeply impatient will be triggered by it. So I think that there also has to be this sort of constant evaluation of self, even if we're working with a coach.
Yeah, I agree. And I think this kind of lends itself to the conversation around tracking as well, because that's just another form of data. And you have to know whether these things are right for you. And again, there's so many ways to use these tools, but you have to know when you're using them, then how to interpret that data. Like if you decide to weigh yourself once every 2 weeks, and it's up or it's down, you have to know that it probably went up and down a whole bunch. It doesn't really mean that much. If you're someone who decides to weigh yourself every day, which I did for a long period of time, and it actually, for me, really healed my relationship with the scale because I was able to see it completely as data, and I really saw the fluctuations day to day as much as 4 to 5 pounds sometimes based on what I had eaten. And it really gave me that information. And then I was able to use that in a way that worked for me, just like with tracking. Like people think, oh, if you track your food, you have disordered eating. Like, no, that's not true. There are some people who track their food who have an eating disorder or disordered eating. Yes, that does not mean that tracking food is bad for everyone. In a lot of cases, it can give you information. It can help kind of create structure. And then maybe over time, this is what I did. I tracked my food every day for a very long period of time. And now I track like a couple days a week here and there. And it just provides like a little bit of structure and just like information. And it's kind of like a check-in. But again, these things are not black and white. It's black and white when you are eating in a way where you're not giving yourself enough nutrition, where you're blatantly, clearly restricting, where you are mentally and emotionally distressed because of the way you're eating. That's a problem. But to say that these tools are the causes of those problems is not accurate or fair. And I think closes off a lot of useful things that can be really helpful and beneficial to people. I mean, most of my clients track in some form. Some use an app, some write down in a journal, some use the notes app on their phone, some send me pictures. There's so many ways to do this. And I will tell you, the information that they get is fascinating to them. And then they're able to make adjustments and changes and shifts and see some of their behaviors around eating and their patterns around eating. And like, these tools are meant to create information so that you can then learn from that, and then do something about it if you want to. So yeah, again, it's a tool. These things are tools, and how you use them, there's lots of ways, but then the way you interpret the data that you get also matters.
So couldn't agree with you more. It's actually been more quote unquote healing and shame reducing to have more data points for myself. That's for myself. I'm someone who really likes data though. I'm all about spreadsheets. I'm like, yes, give me spreadsheets. And having more information about myself really does help, because I have a harder time with understanding how I feel about things. So these are all prompts that allow me to experience. But I would say without having a coach at the same time, for me to get this amount of data about myself in the past would have driven me to tears. Now I look at it as fascinating because I have a supportive coach who helps me be more neutral. And I try to be that supportive coach for my clients to help them be more neutral. And of course, there might be tears and the rest of it associated. When I saw the scale tick up by 4 pounds from not getting enough sleep and having a really high intensity exercise session, I hadn't put those things together yet, that would create massive amounts of inflammation in my body. And I'm like, I don't understand. I'm exercising. I'm doing the quote unquote right things. And yet the scale is betraying me, But that is actually being able to be vulnerable about that is how you get the coaching to understand, like, hey, actually that's normal. And let's look at whether that's something that is good for you or negative for you, or should you actually then, okay, fine, just know that after that kind of an exercise session, that's what's going to happen to you, or should we actually take that out of your program, right? It gives you so many more options if you can be neutral about it. But you're right. I think people are looking at the tracking behavior or the scale or the metrics as the source of problem instead of the weight that we apply to those tools and the coaching that we do around those tools, right? Like, do you guys still get the people who are like, you're going to be so mad at me, I had a cupcake this weekend, like, and they're like running around, my trainer's going to be so mad at me. And I'm like, wow, like, I guess that's where we are as a society, where trainers of the past really did shame people so much. I mean, I know that there's some several people who shame their clients into that. And that, I think, is where we have to do the healing work in this industry. It's like, I am neutral. I'm like, did you like it? Was it a delicious cupcake? Did you have a great time? Right?
Yes.
I had a client just come back. They had a birthday party and their professional retirement party in New York, big deal, big company. And they're like, oh my God, we're so stiff this morning. And I'm like, yeah, but that champagne probably really did taste good, right? So let's just get back on track today, get moving. Anyway.
That's such an important point though. Sorry, Nikki, I don't mean to cut you off.
Oh.
Is that like, I don't want to like transition away because I know, Nikki, you're about to say something, but when we think about like being healthy and what health is, it's not just about eating nutritious food. It's all the things, Isabelle, that you just mentioned, is being able to eating food that you enjoy, being able to go to a party and a significant life event and enjoy yourself, but also not enjoy yourself and stuff yourself because it's like my chance and that mentality, but because you know how to eat in a way that works for you. You know when it's like, okay, I'm going to have the extra piece of cake because it's so delicious. And even if it doesn't feel that great in my body, I'm okay with that. Or, to say that is not worth it for me to feel that way.
Right.
And to do that in the context of enjoying food and having drinks or whatever it is that you like I'm a dessert person. Like, I could give up alcohol for the rest of my life and it would have no impact on me, but I love desserts. And so many times it's like, I'm not going to have sugar. I'm not going to have sugar. Sugar's the enemy. Sugar's this, sugar's that. Like, no, it's not like that black and white. And I know there are a few people who completely cut out sugar and are very happy. For most people, that's completely unrealistic. But knowing like how to eat these things in a way that make you feel good is what it's about, and enjoying them and knowing when you eat them in a way that don't make you feel good. And that's what health is. That's what, in addition to eating nutritious food, it's this, and this gets into a conversation around self-trust, which I don't know if we want to go there yet, but
oh yeah, let's go to all the places. Like, because here's the thing with all of this is like, this is why this black and white thinking is so damaging. Is it's like context matters, and it's like if you make a choice, it's a single choice, and you decide later, like the next day or 10 minutes or whenever, you're like, oops, it's okay to do something and then be like, why'd that happen? Right? Like I do that all the time with myself, not just with food, with everything. Like I tend to be kind of reactive. I'm not very patient. And so a lot of the time I will do something and then I'll be like, is that self-serving? No. Maybe I should reflect on that less than self-serving choice and ask myself how I got here. And it doesn't always feel good to be like, I am an unregulated child, but like that happens. And I think that also is a piece of the self-trust. So, but let's get into self-trust, because I think that that's actually the heart of a lot of this. Is we end up sort of falling for these like restrictive diets and these extreme exercise plans and not feeling like we have the autonomy to say yes or to say no to a goal, or not knowing like, when is this a good time to pursue it? When is it not a good time? When should I maybe just step back, even if it's for a day from this or a week, and then step back into it? And that's all self-trust. So Jordana, where was your brain going with that? Because I think that is the heart of what is missing from all of the health, fitness, and nutrition conversations.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, we've all grown up and been conditioned in our society to just follow the plan, like follow the diet, follow the rules, eat the meal plan, like follow this workout, show up at the gym, don't miss a Monday, like, yoga every damn day, or like all of these hashtag things that have circulated around. And even, pre-hashtag, pre-social media, this stuff still existed because I didn't grow up in the age of social media. I'm 41. So, I was in high school and college and dealing with this stuff, well before that, but this stuff has existed for years and years in the media. And so from a very kind of, I think, young age for a lot of us, we never had to check in and pay attention and notice. We just followed what we thought we were supposed to do, what we should do. And then so you lose that trust, you lose that innate ability to know and to pay attention. And so it's about relearning that. And people don't even know that they've lost that. They don't even realize that that's like a thing, that when you follow, all you ever do is jump from diet to diet to diet. You have no idea what it means to be hungry. You have no idea what it means to be full. You don't even know what foods you like, or like how to build like a nutritious meal, because you're just following, like you're just counting points, or you're just like pouring the powder into the blender, or like whatever it is. And but you don't even realize it. And so, it's like this, I'm not even sure exactly how. I'm trying to think about like how that happened for me. It was during the process of working with a coach, that I started to work with just strictly for weight loss. And then all these other things started coming to the surface. And I was like, oh, I didn't even know what I didn't know. And that's kind of what makes this really challenging. And that's why people just jump from diet to diet to diet, because it's like, oh, this isn't working, then this one will work, or this one will work. But it's doing and the thing about it that's, I think, hard is this work is hard. So doing this work of rebuilding, it's uncomfortable. It is going to bring up a lot of shit. You're going to be confronted by things that you didn't even kind of know were there. But when you do it, when you take the time, and it's ongoing, like I have made tremendous progress with this, but I'll be damned if I sit here and tell you that there aren't days where I'm like, I had a big dessert last night, so maybe I should like do a harder workout this morning. That stuff still comes up. I have to acknowledge it. I have to sit with it. I have to like work through it. I don't go and do the workout, but the thoughts still happen. Or same kind of thing. I had a really big meal last night. Today, I'm just going to like cut back a little bit to make up for it. Like, that stuff still happens. It happens less and less. It is still there. This work is ongoing, and you have to be willing to show up and do it and know that you have those skills. And that's a lot harder than going and signing up for the next trendy diet program. It just is. But the payoff in the end is like truly life-changing. It sounds so cliche, but it is. Like the peace and the comfort that I feel like in my own body now after battling this for years is like, there's not even like words. Like people have told, this is going to sound super cheesy and I apologize for saying it, but people have told me that like, I just like seem different and I look different and I act different and I seem happier since I've done all this work. And it's true, because food took up such an inordinate amount of space in my brain, and when I could eat and what I could eat and how much did I eat and what did I eat and how am I going to work that off? Like all the time. Like you can't imagine, but I know I'm like rambling on and on here, but self-trust and learning how to feel and know when you're hungry. How does this food make me feel? Am I hungry or am I craving this? Am I hungry or am I bored? Am I really full? Do I know how to like make a meal that's satisfying and tastes good? All of these things, that's what self-trust is. And it changes everything. And until you do that, I will say this, until you do that, you're going to be on the chronic thing. You're going to gain and lose the weight and gain and lose the weight and gain and lose the weight for the rest of your life until you die. That sounds terrible, but like, it's the truth.
Well, something you brought up here, I know, Isabelle, you probably want to jump in too. So like we were all like, yes, feelings. No, but
sorry.
No, and I think this is going to piggyback on where Isabelle's brain was probably going to, though she might be like, nope, I was somewhere else in this conversation. But a lot of this is like the difference between like nutrition education and like quote unquote dieting and diet culture. And I think a lot of people don't realize, like we say nutrition education, they go, well, that's just for weight loss. And it's like, no, it's a framework for existence. So you don't make yourself nuts around food because you're confused, because you've messed up all of your eating signals, because you grew up in a cesspool culture following wild diets. Cause that's what was, I don't know, like basically crammed down your throat forever and ever. Isabelle, I'll turn the floor to you.
I'm just like still processing everything that Jordana said. It like hit so many places like in my heart, because I don't think you're cheesy at all with anything you're saying. I mean, two things come to mind. One is like, I think my therapist asked this to me recently, because even as somebody who I exercise all the time. And when I was really stuck with like, I don't understand what choices I've made moving here to California. It was a multitude of things of like, one of the things, anyway, I'll share with you a little highlights here, whether they're pertinent or not. This is what's coming up into my mind. Many people have moved in the pandemic. And one of the big issues that she brought up to me or helped illuminate for me is like, okay, many people have moved home, right? They moved back closer to where they were originally from. And she's like, you're returning home. And you've been away I was away for 7 years from California. She's like, you're coming home and you're a different person, except now you're back in a role that you were always in from before, because the other folks around you expect you to play a certain role. And it's this weird game of like, who am I now? Who am I trying to be? What role am I expected to play? And then she's like, you're returning to California, which is the land of the external. And that's where I think I'm tying together what Jordana says. It's half of this is like, whose goals were these to begin with? Who put this seed of whatever in my head that I had to do this thing or that thing that should, and we have a very messed up understanding. Most of us have a very messed up understanding of what health is. So when people say to Jordana, you look different, you are different, you're carrying yourself differently, I understand it is different kind of work. It's a different thing, because most people are so used to the external just being one way. And here I'm in land of Orange County, you can get any face you want tomorrow, right? Like, we can make that happen for you. And it's an external thing that you're putting on, but the internal work, where is that happening? And so for me, what ended up happening when it was one of the exercises within precision nutrition, is done in many programs, is just stopping eating when you're 80% full. And it's a simple habit, it's a simple game to play. It's just learning to pick up on your hunger cues and your, when am I actually hungry? When am I actually full? What does that mean? And for me, like, the feelings that came up with it had nothing to do with the 80% fullness. It was this whole issue of lack of abundance and loss, and the psychology around like, what if I like something so much and it just won't be there anymore? And it had nothing to do. The food was I don't know what you call that. It was a symbol, right? It was a symbol for this idea of lack. And where does that continue to crop up in my life? So the work that is done around nutrition, or you could just say behavior change, because these are all behavior modifications. The habits are the habits. Everyone, and when we go look at the research, what do they say? Any diet you pick works. All of them work, because eventually they create a caloric restriction. So there you go. If weight loss is what you're looking for, choose from any on the list. But you will continue, as Jordana is saying, to fluctuate between one thing and the next, and still not be able to get XYZ goal, because half of it is not half. I think 3/4 of it is actually the other stuff that is the deeper things about. And either for me, it was the idea of loss. And for me, another big piece of it is shame. Like, what would it look like to show up to your meals without so much shame? And now we're learning about what that does literally in how you digest molecules in your body based on how you view them. And that's not fake science. There's real evidence about it alters the way we digest these molecules, that they're neutral. The molecule is neutral. It doesn't have any loaded belief system about it. And we will actually digest it differently based on our beliefs about that molecule. So anyway.
No, I mean, there's so many. That's what's so interesting to me about this conversation, where it's like I started talking about it on social media one day, and then I was like, oh God, I'm never going to shut up. But the reason why is because like there's so, like, even just in what you just said, Isabelle, there's so many pieces there, right? One of them is like, our population has no idea what health looks like. We have no idea what health looks like. We see skinny and it's, you look great. There's just across the board commentary on bodies, right? And then another one is we have like absolutely no baseline for eating or for habits. And so of course we're going to like, and this is the same thing when we like end up like workout hopping, and we're like, again, I don't believe in on the wagon, off the wagon, but that mentality is there, right? Where we're just like, instead of asking ourselves like, does this serve me? Do I enjoy this? Is this sustainable, right? Does this make sense for my goals? We're just kind of chasing a thing. And that thing, because what we're basically chasing is a way to try to feel better. That thing is never going to fulfill us because we're chasing this thing outside of ourselves. And it's really problematic. And then because it's really hard to see ourselves clearly, we're taking in this information from the outside world that they're projecting on us. And a lot of the time when it's not in alignment, it's like really hard to process. And I think something that doesn't get talked about again in weight loss is, for me, one of the things when I got to like a really scary skinny weight was like, I knew I was in trouble, like in my head, like I knew I was in trouble. I wasn't ready to say it out loud. And I was getting all of this feedback from people about like, you look amazing. What have you been doing? And in my head, I'm like, oh, I'm in such a bad place. I don't know how to process this. Right. And then I'm also on top of being like, I'm in a really bad place right now, like in my head, and I don't know what to do with this. I'm also dealing with the fact that like, I've looked one way for most of my life. And the world has treated me and seen me through one lens for most of my life. And now all of these people, strangers on the street at random, are treating me like I am a completely different person. And I now have to contend with the fact that like all of the things that I thought were bad about the world are actually bad. And I have to deal with like the mistrust of humanity. And then I have to feel like borderline resentful to this person who doesn't know me, who knows none of my history because they think they've complimented me. And I don't think that this conversation about how to grapple with like, even if you change your body on your own terms, and even if you do it in a sustainable way, if something changes, how do you deal with the fact that you have one identity that you perceive yourself as, and all of a sudden the rest of the world is going to see you through a different identity? And I don't know if this belongs in this conversation, but this is something that I think about a lot because I think it's really messed up.
Yeah, I agree. And I've had conversations with friends who, you know, are considered thin and fit, who I had no idea were like, I feel so much pressure to stay this way. I'm afraid of gaining weight. I'm afraid of what people will think of me and then how people will see me, and friends who work in fitness and friends who don't work in fitness and health. And yeah, like I think it's a real thing. I never fully experienced that because I was never like super skinny. But I remember like when I did isogenics, that was when I got to like as an adult, one of my lowest weights. So you're eating 1,200 calories a day, and then 4 days out of the month you don't eat at all. And I remember getting to like my lowest weight, and yeah, people like definitely. And I did this by choice, and people compliment you and whatnot. And then within weeks, the binging was really out of control, and like you gain all the weight back, and then you feel like ashamed, and you're wondering, what do people think about me? And they saw me when I looked like that, and now I've gained like 10 pounds in like a pretty short period of time, or they see me eating this way, and like it's embarrassing, and like, yeah, like I'm just kind of offering my own like personal story experience to yours, Nikki, but I think that the way people perceive us and then sadly like assign like worthiness and value and all of that, this is a huge contributor to why like we then deal with that on our own, because in our culture, thin is better. and nobody cares about how you get there. They only care about what it looks on the outside. But I hear endless stories from people talking about how difficult it is to maintain how I'm looking. And there's so much, and I've talked about this as someone who, is on, like the higher end of like straight size clothing and has, gone into plus sizes and whatnot. People at all sizes battle with this. Mm-hmm. And there are, some people genetically, we haven't even talked about genetics and the role that they play in things, but like some people are genetically like thin. That's how they are. They get thin privilege. 100% they do. Does that mean they don't battle with stuff? No, it doesn't. And I just think that there's been this movement, which I support, towards like not complimenting, not saying, oh, you lost weight, you look so good, or like those things, because you don't know. Like if you're working with a client and it's in a one-on-one coaching relationship, that's a whole other thing. But to like run into someone on the street and make a comment, like, you don't know what's going on in their life. You don't know what they've done. Are they trying to lose weight? Are they not trying to lose weight? Like, yeah, there's like a lot of stuff here about like this external perception from other people based on what your body looks like. There's a lot there.
Well, something that you bring up is consent in a conversation, right? Like I have friends where any weight loss talk I know is going to be harmful to them. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, yep, I'm not having that conversation with you. This is a non-consensual conversation. On social media or on this podcast, it's harder because we're having a one-sided conversation. The three of us are in consent about this conversation, but anyone listening may or may not be consensual in it, which is why this conversation got headed off with a trigger warning. It's why on social media, I try to be very clear about where I stand in the content that you're going to see on my page. But I do think that weight talk and body talk is so socially acceptable, despite being like so psychologically fucked. Yeah. Is that we do need to have a conversation around consent and a little more awareness where like, there is maybe a time when the body image conversation is appropriate and when it's not. And actually, we kind of fell into that right there, Jordana, in a way that was really organic that I think is important to bring up, which is like, part of why this movement is happening that's really important is that people in larger bodied, and I don't care why they're larger bodied, right? I don't care if it's genetic. I don't care about the reasons, right? They truly are marginalized in a way that we have not had that experience, right? And that conversation needs to happen. Like the humanization and like addressing the marginalization of larger bodied people is one issue. And then addressing our own body image issues is a second issue. And if we are smaller bodied people, which the three of us kind of count as somewhere on that spectrum, yes, there is a time and a place where if it's right now, it's a consensual conversation, it may be appropriate to talk about body image issues. And there's times when it's not. So considering like read the room.
Yeah. This is one of the moments where I really do want to be like, fuck the patriarchy, because I think like that, I'm like, how did we get here? Like, so one of the, again, it's going to be me sharing my therapy sessions with you guys because it's been a year. And one of the issues that's come up for me is as coming out of quarantine, begin to see family members again. And I'm a half Filipino, and in the Filipino culture, which I've had to now this year really look at, like, is it just my family or is this a cultural thing? And it turns out is likely more a cultural thing. It is very common also in other countries in Asia, and I'm sure in lots of other countries, but it is less taboo to walk up to someone you know and go, what's that on your face? Gosh, you're so fat now. What happened to you? And these are the things that, have been said to me by uncles and aunties having not seen them for who knows how long. And it's, gosh, why did you get so fat? What happened? And like, so I'm thinking in this body that is quite quote unquote normal, what is the experience of someone who is in a larger body going to their medical provider, being affronted with this nonsense that's like, whether it, and then not, I'm not the person to go into what that experience must be like. All I know is that the shame that made me feel, the feelings of childhood, not being good enough, and the same kind of things happened when, because of cultural differences, because of where we place our value on women, one of the things that happened, I finished training for my Strong First Level 2 in 2018. So I was at my most, muscular buff, right? I'm working with big weights. It was a lot of work to do, 53-pound press, all this stuff, right? So I go on a family trip to the Philippines, and I'm in the Philippine culture again. And they had a harder time understanding what I did for work. So they thought that I was a yoga teacher, right? And they would go, why are you so fat? I thought you taught yoga. And so first of all, a woman having muscles is not equated with being strong or muscular. It was equated with being fat. And I don't know what to say about that. These are just the things that are, I think, just messed up about culture in general and make things really hard. And it's where when you start to work on trying to be more in integrity with who you are as a person and with what you want, how you want to treat your body, it will require, or it can be very helpful to have a supportive community around you and have professional help, because it is very challenging to stay. It would be much easier for me to go back to, well, I guess I should slim down. I should stop lifting weights. I should just do whatever they view as the signs of health and give up on my goals. But I'm fortunate to have the education to know that sarcopenia is real for women. And I would rather be a little bit heavier and be stronger than be the opposite. And but I get to choose those things because I now have the knowledge and understanding of, hey, weight may or may not correlate with what is most important to me. And there are times when weight is important to me. Like right now, weight loss is important to me, but also in the framework of knowing that not at the expense of losing my muscle and not at the expense of losing my strength. So my progression is going to be slower than perhaps another diet could promise me, right? So anyway, that's fuck the patriarchy. That's my piece there.
But also something that you're bringing up here again is like this idea of like personal vanity, which I actually don't think is a bad thing. And I'm going to say that as someone who really, really struggles with owning personal vanity, right? But like for other people, I don't judge other people for their personal vanity, just myself. That's how my game works. But I do think that there's something to be said for sort of being like, is this mine? Do I want to really deal with this? Does this make sense for me? Or is this being projected onto me? And if it's being projected onto me from a real person, right? Not the Instagram boogeyman. I'm not saying that pressure isn't real, but like, is this actually coming from an outside source that I like need to address and remove in my life? Or is this coming from like an internalized pressure of the culture outside of me? And what do I need to do to sort of parse that out, knowing that that's going to be messy and complicated? That's a piece of it. I think also, again, back to Jordana's points about like self-worth, self-trust, when we actually value like our well-being and we can look at things in the greater scope of like, this is really messing me up, like, and I have some other stuff to work on. I think something that people don't want to hear, particularly in the aesthetics conversation, is like, if you're not mentally and physically stable and you're going to pursue weight loss, you're going to have some problems. I don't want to like, again, I don't want to be like the grim reaper of this, but like a lot of us have a lot of like physical and psychological shit to unpack. And and you can sort of do it while pursuing weight loss, but depending on how dramatic it is, you might need to start there and you might need to spend some time there. And this whole process it doesn't happen in 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, a year. It's like, it's complicated and it's messy. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's like, there's so many facets to this. And I haven't mentioned, I see a therapist as well and have for years. And, there's a lot that a coach can do, but there's, things that sometimes need to be addressed that are kind of bigger than that. And again, that these bring up things that people don't want to face, that I don't need that. I don't want to go to therapy. I just want to lose weight. I just want to lose 15 pounds. Like, I get it. Like, that's the easy way out, even though it sucks while you're doing it, because whatever diet you're doing is going to suck. And then you just end up on this hamster wheel. Like, you have to address this stuff. Like, in some way, if you ever want to find like this piece, whatever words you want to use, self-acceptance, like self-trust, all of these things, which sound like very lofty. But if you have been like on the jumping from diet to diet and feeling really defined by the number on the scale and like what you see in the mirror and all these things, like there are ways to work with that. Like, I remember just thinking, well, if I just didn't have this stomach, if I just like, and I would see people, if I just like looked like her, I just like, just this, just that, like, then I'll be happy. Yeah. It just does not work that way. One, because I never got to those places and now I'm happy. And two, because I've talked about this a little bit and I'm going to be talking about it more like really publicly soon. It's not a secret, but I had a nose job when I was 16. I was severely bullied in 7th grade, really severe, especially obviously there was no internet, but for what was happening at the time, really severe. And it obviously had I had a big nose for sure. Like, and I wasn't not saying that it was like I deserved for it to happen, but like I had a big nose and I was already like self-conscious about it. And so when I was 16, my parents had given me the choice and the option, and I decided that I wanted to do it. And like, I will tell you that I surgically like altered my body to feel better about myself. And I still had a million issues about feeling good about myself after that. All my weight issues came after my body image, all of these things about my body. And I wasn't in high school. I wasn't in a bigger body. I was just kind of like average size and average weight. And I already was not happy with how I looked because I had a bigger waist. I was just bigger. I'm 5'8". I'm just a bigger person. I'm not petite. I've never been petite. And so I just share that to say that changing something physically about yourself is not the source. It's not the answer. Mm-hmm. Like, mm-hmm. It's just not. You have to do the work behind it. So like the weight loss, the size, this number on the scale, the clothing size, all of these things, you think that's it, but then you get there and you're like, well, now I want to change something else. You move on to something else. Well, now I got to get rid of these lines. Now I got to do this. Now I got this. Now it's like, it's always something, and it will always be something until you do that work. And the work is ongoing again. Like, I don't want it to come off like I'm sitting here saying, I've got it all figured out. Like, I don't. But I do the work and I just keep doing it. And some days it's easy and some days it's really fucking hard.
Don't you think a lot of the work is like catching yourself when you find yourself in that rat race of chasing the next shiny gold star? Because like this is part of why I'm so neutral to weight loss is like, I'm like, yeah, I really screwed myself up with that. But then I'm like, you want to know what else I screwed myself up with? And it's like, check. It's like every freaking thing in my life, right? It's like, because I am the type of personality that I don't know if it's, nature, nurture, whatever. Like I am the person who it's like, give me a thing and I will self-sacrifice at the altar of like chasing the gold star. And it has taken me so long not to do that. And that tendency hasn't gone away. Mm-hmm. I've just gotten much better at like, at the beginning of the thought virus, it's like, oh, the next step to this is the hamster wheel. Don't go there. And it's like catching it and be like, no, you have to sit. Like so much of the work is like inaction, not actual action.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think like the observation of like, do I really want this? But again, I think part of it is you can make better informed decisions when you understand factually what is going to be required, or you can process it through a lens of like, will this make me a happier, more well-grounded human? Will this send me into a spiral? Whose goal is this? Right? When you can start to put these pieces together, like, is this a good time for me to go pursue that? Right? So I would say that for every client who's come to me who had a particular weight goal in mind, about 50 or more, or maybe 60% of those folks who began working on a weight loss program, about halfway through the program realized, actually, the number on the scale isn't what I was looking for. I just thought that was what I was supposed to work on. The actual thing I really care about is my blood pressure is better. I'm more active. My joints don't hurt as much. I get better sleep at night. And when those things fall into place, because sleep is a huge one, because Lord, we don't make good decisions when we can't sleep enough, right? When those other things fall into place, this better alignment with happiness, this rationality about really deciding like, what do I really want for myself? And it's often not the weight. It was just some other kind of change that had to start with this thing that's called weight loss, because we know what that is. We know that that's the way to change ourselves. And really the change we were looking for was something completely different.
Yeah. And I'm gonna round us out here and then give you each a moment to like have a parting thought, because we could this podcast could be all week, right? It's there's just so much nuance, and it's so complex, and it depends, and there's so many stories and pieces of it, right? But this also comes back to like, I took a walk this morning and I was like, why why am I having this conversation, right? Because whenever I head off a conversation, especially a messy conversation like this, where I'm like, I'm going to say something wrong, it's not going to go well. I'm going to admit a whole bunch of stuff about myself and my person. And I'm just like, oh boy, why am I doing this, right? And I realized because I'm like, I'm not trying to defend weight loss. So I was like, why am I having a conversation that like basically feels like in defense of weight loss other than like defending my own choices? I was like, am I defending my own choices? No. I realized what it was is that a lot of people in the fitness industry are coming at this from a place of, or people new to the fitness industry enter it because they want to lose weight. And if we tell them that's a bad goal, we lose them. We never get a chance to educate and to help them. And so for those of us who are okay with talking about weight loss, that's why that conversation needs to happen. It's not to necessarily encourage weight loss for that person. That's their entry point, but we want to get them to a place where they feel good. And I know Jordana needs to go. So Jordana, any parting thought before we head this off?
Yeah, I have to go grab my son from school. The work is hard, but it is worth it. And I encourage you, if you are someone who has been on this journey, like I think, the three of us have in different ways, and a lot of people listening, and this up and down with trying the diet and trying this and trying to look a different way, that when you find someone to support you and work with you, whether it's a coach or whatever kind of format it takes for you, it is worth it to put in the work and to get uncomfortable, because the benefit of that is going to set you up for life. Right? Maybe it's weight loss. Maybe it's not. Maybe you discover things along the way, but you deserve that. You deserve that. You deserve more than this crazy cycle of insanity and restriction and suffering that we are all putting ourselves through, because that's just how our society operates. And that's what we were taught to do. So yeah, those are my parting thoughts.
Okay, great. Jordana, I'm going to let Isabelle have her parting thoughts after this, but so you can go pick up your son. Quick places for people to find you.
Yes. Instagram is really the best place, at Jordana Edelstein. I assume Nikki's probably going to tag it in the show notes, so I won't spell it out. It's just my first and last name. I'm always there. I'm sharing stuff all the time. It's easy to connect. My website is also the same, JordanaEdelstein.com. Those are really the two best places.
All right. Thanks, Jordana. I'll let you hop off.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Jordana.
Bye.
Isabelle, your final thoughts on this conversation?
I think we've outlined a pretty comprehensive conversation here. I'm looking forward to listening to parts of it and seeing if we missed anything. I'm sure there's lots of things that we did miss. I'm blown away by Jordana, by the way. She's phenomenal. I think more so, thanks, Nikki, for hosting this kind of conversation, because I think it's spot on. Like, people, I'm happy that the industry, the culture is shifting to swing the pendulum one way, to say like, hey, you don't have to lose weight. Weight loss isn't the only thing that's indicative of health. And yet there is an important place for understanding, if you do want to lose weight, if you do want to change something about physical appearance, let's make sure that you have the right information and the right kind of coaching to be able to do it in a way that is logical, and also not having to feel additionally guilty, which is a new phenomenon out there that adds another layer of, like what Jordana was saying, pushes people back into diet culture, of the toxic diet culture, instead of letting people get the information they need. So thank you for hosting this conversation.
Thank you for being a part of it. I have a feeling that the three of us, I'm just going to assume Jordana will agree, we'll triage on this again. Isabelle, for people who want to find you online, best places. Yeah.
So you can find me Instagram, stronger_human. And my website is also strongerhuman.com.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for listening. I'm curious to get your feedback on this one, because this was definitely, it's a conversation I'm really wanted to have. It's a conversation I'm really excited that we had, but also it's a sticky, messy conversation in which I don't feel like I have very many answers on it. I feel like in the realm of this conversation, I'm often just asking more questions and trying to help us all ask more questions for ourselves, to come to a place where we are all more compassionate with ourselves and all more compassionate with the people around us, and all just sort of generally better informed to take better care of ourselves and our fellow humans. And I'm not really sure about the best way to do that. So I don't know. This was just one of the conversations that was top of mind to me. So we had it, and I appreciate you all listening, and we will catch you on the next episode. Thanks for listening. Make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel so you never miss an episode. If you want to stay in touch, you can also click the link in the description to join my list for free exclusive fitness and nutrition content.